Paul Catalina, Sam Kahn of The Athletic. Here with us. And Sam, Smokey and Craig have a high school game tonight. Tomorrow, Smokey is going to Nebraska for the first time ever as this huge Nebraska fan. So I'm solo for the next 2 days. So we've had a real risky business thing going on.
I feel like they leave you solo way more often than they should. I feel like it's been you and me for a few weeks now. What is this? Checking out, and I know, and I remember Craig saying a couple of weeks ago, if I heard him say correctly, this is my last year doing high school football. Like,
yeah,
man, it's they're mailing it in over there.
Yeah,
you're really the one doing the real work here.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm doing the heavy lifting. Sam, I do have to ask you this. Did you see the Charles? I'm curious because you're more well traveled when it comes to me into the different parts of the college football world. I didn't know what Tudor's Biscuits was until Charles Huff said anything about it. But now I feel like I got to go to Charleston, West Virginia, and go to Tudor's Biscuits.
I did not know it either, so I've never been to Marshall. So that is an effective recruiting pitch if I've ever heard one. And honestly, every head college football coach should use their local dining establishment as a recruiting pitch. I remember, I think is it Catfish Hole in Fayetteville that that Brett Bielema used to use that. They used to use it for official visits. I would imagine maybe they still do this these days, but more and more programs should leverage and unapologetically broadcast their best eating establishment, because I think that factors more into a recruit's decision than maybe people would realize.
Yeah. I know this, but I do think it should be it's like a yearly article but it should be something. I think this is up. You and I could go on the road and do this very well. I think we
100%.
We have discerning taste enough to where we know and find out where could just recruit it on the food, not the facilities.
That's right.
And not anything else. Recruit it. That's why, when people say, oh, this place is in this big city or that big city. You know what? I've been in some small towns that have way better food than big cities. So, otherwise, Tulane would be a juggernaut because they they just wouldn't have to pick one place. They're what is your thing? So.
Yeah. It's hey man, I'm all for anytime I go on a road trip, I'm looking on the map to see, or I'm texting people or calling people and being like, where do I need to eat?
Where do you think A&M's place is? That's always kind of tripped me up because they've got some cool stuff, but they've never really had a thing that at least is not atmosphere over necessarily the quality of the food.
Well, they've been on the come up. Really, I feel like in the last 10 years, Fuego is a great place to go because you've got great tacos. I'm a personal favorite chicken oil company. They got really good burgers there.
Yeah, I love chicken oil.
They did just close Fargo's barbecue, which makes me sad because Fargo's was a classic. And you had Rib Tip Tuesdays. They don't have that anymore, unfortunately. But they do have another really good barbecue joint that opened up in the last couple of years. I think it's called 1775.
Okay.
And that I've been there. That place is legit. So that's really good. They have done a really good job of becoming a better, having larger selection in College Station than just going to the chicken, which nothing against the chicken. It's awesome to go to the chicken every time.
Absolutely.
But they've become a lot better and having a lot wider range of options now.
Okay. Good deal. All right, let's dive into this week. When it comes to A&M, they play Bowling Green. I'm not really interested about that. I think we know what's going to happen against Bowling Green. But they have a quarterback situation now in College Station, and Marcel Reed was great against Florida. Connor Wegman didn't play well against Notre Dame, but that's Notre Dame's one of the better defenses in the country. First game of the season, his first game in 11 months and all of that. They actually have maybe a good problem at quarterback, right? Where they've got two guys that they really like, and I don't think they really sneeze at Jalen Henderson all that much if it had to get down to it. They actually have two players that they like, but what do you think is the future for that? Because both of them have different skill sets.
Yeah, and I think Connor Wegman is a tremendous talent. To me, in the opener against Notre Dame, he didn't look like himself to me. And now we're starting to learn that he's a little bit banged up and that he's got the AC joint sprain that they're working on. It makes a lot more sense to me now because he looked a little bit hesitant at times. His footwork wasn't all the way there. The ball wasn't coming out the way it usually does. And now it kind of makes sense as to why maybe that was, because he did not look like the confident Connor Wegman that I saw as a true freshman in his first start to Ole Miss, when he looked terrific. And then beating LSU that year. Then last year before the injury, he looked really, really good. I just hadn't seen that Connor Wegman yet. I'd love to see him 100% healthy. But on the flip side, I think Marcel Reed is a better fit schematically for what Colin Klein wants to do. And I think you saw that against Florida, the way they do some of the design quarterback runs. I think he's a more natural straight line runner than Connor Wegman. Wegman feels more to me like a scrambler who scrambles to throw. Not that he cannot run, he can, but it just felt more natural and fluid with Reed in the game, even though Reed hasn't had as much time working in this offense. So I think they're in a good spot. And if you're Mike Elko, you don't have to force anything. This does not have to be a narrative establishing decision here. You're in year one of a new program. You're in year one of the build. There's no reason to make a rash decision and say, this is our guy and this is what we're going to do. Feel it out from week to week. Let the play on the field do it speaking for itself. Let Connor Wegman heal up and be 100%. But I think if you go with Marcel Reed right now, when he's healthier, I think that's the smart way to go.
Yeah, I agree with you. Arch Manning has made his debut, and it was a splash, Sam. And he's going to have the next two games, I would think. I mean, there's no reason to rush Quinn Ewers back against Louisiana Monroe and then Mississippi State, especially since Arch has shown that he's ready to go. And look, in a normal situation, Quinn Ewers could have maybe even left after last year, although because there was a crowded quarterback class, he would have gotten maybe pushed out of the first round, but I don't think he would have fallen much further into the second. So Arch Manning could be starting this year in a different world, but Quinn Ewers back, and obviously he's better than he was a year ago, but still gets banged up, and he's missed a little time every single year. What did you think of Arch Manning, and how big is the hype train going to grow if he does, in fact, maybe play after the bye week as well?
Yeah, I think at this point, I think the hype train's already leaving the station at this point. And the thing that's interesting about it is that there's the outer noise that's going on, which is all of us talking about it. And then there's what's going on in Austin, which I don't think it's as big of a deal down there, just because I think Steve Sarkisian has done a masterful job of managing this situation, because there's a million ways this thing could have gone wrong. But he came out very forcefully, I think, right after Arch enrolled on campus, that after that first spring that Arch had, he said, Quinn is our starter. And coming into this year, Quinn is our starter. And by the way, Quinn has earned it. And you go look at what he did, going to beat Alabama on the road, taking them to the playoff, going to beat Michigan on the road this year. He has a resume that is really hard to knock. So I think when he comes back, the job is his. We can wax poetic about whatever Arch does against ULM or Mississippi State if he happens to start then, but none of that's going to change Quinn's status. Once Quinn's healthy, he's the guy. Now, Arch, when it's his turn and when he takes the reins for good, watch out, buddy, because he drives the ball so well down the field. You can tell that he gets the offense. He's comfortable. He looks so much more comfortable now than he did a year ago. I remember watching him in that spring game, and I thought to myself, he was swimming. Like, you could tell it was a little fast and it was a little overwhelming for him. Now it looks like he understands the offense. He knows what to do. He can make the reads and get through his progressions without a problem. He can make the adjustments on the fly. And, oh, by the way, the guy's got some wheels. I was really impressed. I knew he could run, but I didn't see 67-yard touchdown coming. So once he takes the reins for real after Quinn is done, whenever that is, the ceiling is limitless, in my opinion, for Arch Manning.
Yeah, so you wrote on the Longhorns this week and all the questions that they've already kind of answered, and then the ones still to be to be answered. Now, the biggest thing is that they probably likely won't get challenged until after that bye against Oklahoma. And then there's a chance they have 2 weeks of challenge, and then they have a couple weeks of not. They've benefited from the first year schedule that was nice. Like, I think that you look at them right now, there's three teams I see like giving them headaches, and two of them are Georgia and Oklahoma, and the other one would be A&M. And just because of what the emotions of that game are going to be back in College Station for the first time in 13 years. But all the rest of it, the way that they've looked, like even a bad day, they should be able to handle most of these teams. How much do you think they will get challenged throughout the year?
I think they will. OU is OU. The Red River Shootout, we know, I hate to say the cliche, throw the records out, but it truly is one of those games. And we've seen it play out plenty of times. Georgia's going to be a challenge, of course. A&M is going to be a challenge, I think, in large part because of, like you said, the atmosphere that you're walking into. The other tricky one that I would put down, not because I think the team is all that great, but because the situation, again, you talk about emotions and rivalries, is the game at Arkansas on November 16th. Last time they went to Fayetteville, they got hammered. Now, granted, that was a team that ended up going 5-7, so Texas was not nearly as good then as they are now. But the emotions for that game from that Arkansas fan base are going to be off the meter. I think Steve Sarkisian even said it himself at SEC Media Days. He said, I think there's probably some Arkansas fans who probably hate Texas more than they love their own team. And Sam Pittman was like, yeah, he's probably right about that. And so I think that one could be interesting. But beyond those games, I don't see, like, Florida, I don't think is going to be a challenge. Vanderbilt, I don't think it's going to be a challenge. Mississippi State right now really looks rough, so I don't expect they're going to be a challenge next week. Kentucky will be an interesting one because of just what we saw them do against Georgia. But Texas, I'm sure, will have a clunker at some point. We saw it last year against Houston. We saw it against K-State. They were able to win those clunkers. Now you're in a different conference with a higher level of line of scrimmage talent, a higher level of skill talent. So that essentially becomes the question for Texas. Can you win your clunkers in the SEC? Because that's going to ultimately determine whether you can win the SEC, whether you can make it to the college football playoff. But if they get through this first stretch here before Red River at 5-0, then I think you've bought yourself a little wiggle room.
Oh, for sure. And look, they don't have to go undefeated to make the playoff. Like this is a different era. So, but right now, to me, it looks like they're at least one of the favorites to be in that SEC title game, especially given the schedule that it's less difficult than Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, or Tennessee, who are all right there with them, in the SEC as well, up at the top. In the Big 12 this week, Oklahoma State and Utah. That game, I would expect it to be super physical and maybe a little bit more low scoring-ish or medium scoring, like kind of in the middle there. What does this game come down to? Because Oklahoma State's shown that they have some problems on defense, but offensively they have maybe some more explosive weapons on the outside than Utah does. But Utah's probably a little bit better at quarterback. And both these guys are 48 years old, too.
Well, assuming he plays, by the way, because I think there's still some ambiguity about whether Cam Rising's going to play. We saw the line move overnight pretty significantly. So that makes me wonder a little bit. I think most of us have assumed that Cam Rising's going to play. If he doesn't, though, I still buy into Utah being able to stay in that game because of how good they are defensively. They're one of the best in the country in third downs. They're one of the best defenses in multiple metrics. So I think they'll stay in that game. And Oklahoma State hasn't really, I don't feel like they've hit their stride running the ball yet. Like Ollie Gordon hasn't had that explosion that we saw last year. So this is a fascinating game to kind of find out. Like, is Oklahoma State, have they been vanilla? Is it been by design that it's been that way? Or are they going to finally unleash and unlock? Or is there an issue that we're going to see surface against Utah? I agree with you. I think this is a low scoring affair. This is going to be one of those rock fights, and I'm sure Kyle Whittingham is going to love that because his team is built for winning those types of football games. But this will be really good. And again, not a be-all, end-all, certainly a game that someone gets the inside track early on in this Big 12 race, but there will be a chance to come back for whichever these teams does not win it.
What am I supposed to make of Texas Tech after the win over North Texas last week?
That's a great question because I thought they looked awful through 2 weeks. Of course, losing against Wazoo and then barely beating Abilene Christian. And then you saw how they looked last week, and they looked fast, and they looked physical. They looked disciplined. And that was a really good palate cleanser, so to speak. And they got some good fortune. A couple of the Chandler Morris picks were balls that went off receivers' hands into the air, and and Texas Tech was able to snag those. Those are not all, those are not all just, hey, Texas Tech forced a turnover. Some of that's good fortune, but they dominated that game pretty much from start to finish. So if you're Joey McGuire, if you're Texas Tech, you feel really good about that. Now you got to carry that over to a really scrappy Arizona State team that I know a lot of people are going to overlook that win against Texas State, but I thought that was a really quality win because you knew everybody in San Marcos was charged up for it. They had gotten out to a lead. And I thought the discipline that they showed, the poise that they showed to kind of come back and pull that out in crunch time was really impressive. And this is just going to be a fun one to watch. I think these are two teams that have not played very often.
Mm-hmm.
You think about, I think the last time they played was 2016, 2017, and the scores were like 68-55 and 52-48 or something like that. It's not going to be quite like that because I think both these defenses are a lot better, but I think this has the potential to be really fun because you've got two young coaches in Kenny Dillingham, Joey McGuire. You've got two really good running backs in Taj Brooks and Cam Scatteraboo. And you've got two really programs that are trying to up in the hierarchy of the league, I think, and trying to establish themselves in this new Big 12. So it's going to be fascinating. I kind of wish it was a night kick in Lubbock because I think that would make it a little more interesting. But this will be a definite barometer for both of these programs to give us a sense for where's Arizona State, how for real are they at 3-0, and Texas Tech was last week just a fluke, and what we saw the first 2 weeks is really the truth, or are they back on track now and they're going to move forward and be successful?
Yeah, I'm so curious about where they are right now and who they really are. The other who are you game is Kansas and West Virginia because these teams have wildly disappointed their fans for the first 3 weeks.
Anxiety bowl. Can you say a ton of angst in this game because you've got Neil Brown who shut everybody up on the hot seat talk last year and win 9 games. And, okay, you lost the opener against Penn State. I feel like, okay, you can probably chalk that one up, whatever. This one against Pitt, the backyard brawl, and you lose it in the fashion in which they lost it. That's a heartbreaker. And now all of a sudden you've got the fan base talking about, you got the narrative started again about his job security, fair or unfair. That's just kind of how it's going. So this is a must win for West Virginia that way. On the other side, you got Kansas who thought they were going to be in the Big 12 title game hunt. Now sitting here at 1-2, Jalen Daniels has thrown 6 picks, thrown 5 in the last 2 weeks of 2 games. They should have beat Illinois. UNLV, I don't know that I would say they should have, but you had that one at home, and that was one that if you were a Big 12 title contender, you should win that game. But they've kind of gotten outplayed the last couple of weeks, and you've got to be able to take care of the football. So they're on the brink of losing 3 straight. So this is a must win for both of these programs. Both of these programs had some kind of vision of being in the conversation in November. Buddy, if you're going to be in that conversation, you have to win this one if you're those programs. So this is going to be fascinating because I think both of them need it in a big way. I think West Virginia and Neil Brown probably need a little more than Kansas does. But again, if Kansas loses 3 straight, gosh, that really kills the mood after all preseason hype that we thought they were going to be in the mix here.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, a couple more I got to ask you about TCU and SMU. Does TCU's disappointing loss maybe get them twice, or is SMU, because of the quarterback change and all that, maybe not ready to deal with what is going to be a pretty decent offensive onslaught from the Horned Frogs?
Yeah, I'm still wondering if SMU is going to be able to score enough to keep up with TCU. TCU should not have lost that game last week to UCF, and that one's going to sting for a while. They have got to bounce back in this one, I think, just for angst, for anxiety's sake. In their fan base, because I think if you lose this one, then I think the Horned Frog fans I think it's really going to get a little uneasy for them. I look at the skill talent over there. I look at what I saw from them last week for most of the game, and I see a team that I think is just more explosive than SMU is right now. I do like the change to Kevin Jennings just because I don't think SMU's offensive line is in a place to protect Preston Stone. For any of you guys who watched the BYU game, they were teeing off on him, and he had no time to get rid of the ball. They've lost a couple linemen in the portal this offseason. So until you can get pass protection shored up, I think Jennings, who is the more mobile guy, is the way to go, and they move the ball better with him in the game, and the pass rush seemed to recede a little bit. That said, I think they have a ton of talent. I love what they did in terms of adding offensive skill talent these last 2 off seasons at SMU. So I'm not saying they don't have the firepower to keep up, but I just don't think with Jennings coming in and making the first start, I don't think it's all together there yet enough far along to beat TCU.
All right, and this will transition nicely into Matt McChesney, who's coming up right after you. Baylor at Colorado. This is the first time these teams have played in a long time since Colorado left the league. And it's kind of a different day than when Colorado left the league before, and where Baylor has been since then. Colorado last week improved on defense, but Colorado State's not very good. So it's hard to get a read on who Colorado, if they are in fact improving or if it's just a benefit of playing Colorado State. Baylor with Sawyer Robertson, who I would bet probably plays this week. If DeQuan Finn's in a sling last week, you at least, especially now, you have a reason and an excuse to wait on DeQuan Finn and not rush him back. But he was really good against Air Force, but it was Air Force. So what are we to make of this game? I think Baylor wins it just because they can run the ball, but I really don't know.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. Give DeQuan Finn the extra time to get healed up. Sawyer Robertson look good. And honestly, the thing I'm really fascinated to see in this game is how Baylor looks defensively against all that skill talent that Colorado has. Dave Aranda being the guy calling the defense now has seemingly made a difference. You look through 3 weeks, okay, you can critique the schedule a little bit, but even Utah, and I know Cam Rising went out in that game, but they held them to less than 300 yards. They've not allowed 300 yards to a single opponent yet. I'm kind of liking the Dave Aranda being the defensive coordinator thing so far. I think it's working out. Now, can you put pressure, take advantage of that Colorado front? Colorado State could not, but Colorado State is nowhere near as talented as Baylor is defensively. So this is a game, to me, where if you can light up Shedeur a little bit, then maybe you can relieve some of the pressure. Because if you give him time, and I know Dave Aranda's covered this talking to the media this week, you give Shedeur time, he'll kill you because they have got tremendous skill on the perimeter. For Colorado, I don't buy a ton into that game last week just because of the level of opponent. I don't think Colorado State is really that good. And I know they were fired up because of the trash talk, but that was a really necessary game for them because they really got their rears kicked in against Nebraska. They needed that one. And I think if we're going to take Colorado seriously in any way this year, the Big 12, I think this is one that they probably should win.
This is like a directional game for either one of them. Like if you win, you're probably on the up. If you lose, it's going to be really hard to find your way out of the hole.
100%. Yeah. Same thing with Baylor. Like Baylor, if you're trying to get to the postseason, you're trying to show real progress, this is a game you've got to go and win if you're Dave Aranda.
Absolutely. Sam Kahn, The Athletic. Sam, we'll talk to you next week. Hopefully everyone's here and it's not just you and me, but if it is, I'm fine with that.
That's okay. I appreciate hanging out with you, Paul. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Sam Kahn of The Athletic, one of my favorites to have on the show. Absolutely.